الذين آمنوا وتطمئن قلوبهم بذكر الله ألا بذكر الله تطمئن القلوب.
الله 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 يا
How are you?
I'm good.
Alright, so today we are going to do part number 4 of the series on happiness, and by now you know that what leads to happiness, right? What leads to happiness?
Tranquility.
Tranquility of
Mind.
Tranquility of mind and
Contentment
of the soul. And what leads to that contentment of the soul?
True belief.
True belief. So today what we are going to discuss most importantly is that one factor, just one factor out of the many factors we're going to discuss in the other parts of this series. And that one factor is that if you have true belief, right, that gives you answers to the existential questions that we have. I'm going to explain in a minute that what are those existential questions, but I'll begin with a question, right? And the question is that do questions like these come to your mind, like who are we, why are we here, who created us, and all those kinds of things.
What happens after we die?
This is one of the existential questions that we have, and those questions actually keep us on our toes in search of the purpose of our life. Once we find those answers, then...
But there are many answers already. How do you know which ones are right? Science, philosophy?
Yeah, I know there are many answers, but it doesn't mean that those answers are conclusive as well, right? So the thing is that what type of answers would bring us true contentment and peace of mind? So only conclusive and definitive answers would give us, rational answers would give us true contentment and peace of mind. So I'll just give you a quick example. Like for instance, if they tell us that we are here just by chance and just by coincidence and our creation, think of the way we are created, right? The best of creation, that this all kind of came together just by chance and coincidence, and there's no purpose, no design behind this, right? So that's not something which is rational, and this won't satisfy your mind and soul. So that's why these answers need to be definitive and conclusive to give us some peace of mind and contentment of the soul.
But a scientist might ask, why did God create all this?
Yeah, so this is not the scientist who is asking this question. This is a common question that would come to any human, any thinking and sane human being. And everyone looks for answers to these questions, but they have different abilities and different capacities to find answers to these questions. And that's why we are always in need of guidance, and we always in need of support, and that's why we have the Quran, because the Creator knew that we would need guidance, and that's why He has provided us with the Quran.
Oh, but why the Quran? It's not a book of science or philosophy.
The problem is that if you look at all those questions or try to explore those and explore answers or explore the secrets of existence with using your mind and science and logic and rationale, then that's not possible. And I'm going to explain it to you that how that is not possible. We have this in the center. I would say I would draw 3 circles, right? So what we have here is our Fitrah, F-I-T-R-A, or Fitrah, or our primordial nature, right? And this primordial nature actually is the instigator behind those questions, that who are we, why are we here? And that's why since centuries we are kind of struggling with those questions. And the reason for that is this Fitrah or primordial nature. And then outside of that is our mind and our heart, right? And then outside of that are our doubts, our questions, and worries. What happens is that our fitrah is actually it's neither pure reasoning. It's neither pure reasoning nor it's neither this and neither pure reasoning nor pure feeling, right? So fitrah is neither pure reasoning nor pure feeling, so it's a combination of both. Whereas when it comes to our mind, it has, if we rely on our mind, right, it has three problems, right? Problem number one is that it is very limited in nature, right? Its capacity is very limited, right? It cannot explain the nature of the universe, right? And then our lifetime, we have a very short life, and then our mind has limited capacity, so it cannot explore everything that we need to understand the secrets of our existence. Number two, if we rely on our mind alone, then what happens is that we neglect our heart, right? Our heart and our feelings and other aspects that we don't actually comprehend easily, only through using our mind power. And number three, what we do is that if we rely too much on our mind, we close the doors to revelation, because we don't believe in a creator, and we don't believe in revelations from the creator, right? So these are the three big problems when we rely on our mind alone, right? But the thing is that if we leave our fitrah without any external effect, without any conditioning from outside, then it would lead us to Islam and the true religion. And that's what the Quran says in chapter Rum and verse 30, and it says faqim wajhika lid-dina hanifa, which means that so direct your face towards the religion inclining to truth. Let's look at it from a different perspective, right? And that different perspective is that so we have either we believe in revelation, we believe in revelation, or we don't believe in revelation, right? So if we believe in revelation, then what happens is that it gives us freedom. It gives us freedom from searching what we can search, right? What we can explore. Like we have limitations, like with science and everything. There's a certain extent beyond which we cannot go, and we cannot discover. That's why if we believe in revelation, it gives us that freedom, and also provides us. It provides us answers that satisfy our fitrah, right? And those are solid answers. And what happens is that if we don't believe, we fail to understand. We fail to understand what? The mysteries of nature, right? One thing. Number two, we don't have, as a result, we don't have any tranquility, right? And then when we don't have any tranquility, what we have is fear, doubts, and confusion. And most importantly, when all these things combine, then what happens is that we live like
animals.
We live like animals. Because we don't have any purpose in life, we don't believe in anything, we just limit our word to doing certain things, go to work and do a little bit of entertainment, and that's the end of it, right? And we can't explore or understand the secrets of our existence. And when we don't understand that, we just get lost, and we are always afraid to even think about those questions. And you'll see those people in your life who will say, oh, forget about these things, we don't want to discuss these things, right? So let me take it to the next step. So some people won't even pay attention to those kinds of existential questions, because they will say that we are not philosophers, we are not scientists, we are just here to work and eat and live and sleep, right? So I'll just give you an example. So if you have a goal, GOAL, if you have a goal, which means if you have a destination to which we need to reach, so there are two ways that we can do that. One is that if we rely on our mind, right? And number two is that we rely on the divine revelation, right? So let's take these two examples. So if we rely on our mind, then what happens is that we rely on what? We rely on human philosophy, philosophy, right? That we rely on human philosophy and whatever little discoveries that we can make, which doesn't give us conclusive answers. So what happens is that we become lost, like someone in a desert, right? And if someone is in a desert, what happens is that he keeps seeing something, like he sees water in a distance, and then that's not the reality. So that's exactly what happens to them. Or this is the example of a desert, right? But on the other hand, the Quran gives the example of them being in a sea. So if you are deep down in a sea, then what happens is that there is darkness in the depth of the sea. There is darkness, which science discovered recently with the Quran mentioned that 14 centuries ago, and he says that then they are in darkness, and it's actually chapter that's called chapter Nur, and the verse is 40, and it says that those who don't rely on revelation and they rely on their mind alone, then they are like those who are in the depth of ocean, and then they cannot, if they stretch out their hand, they cannot see their hand, and when you cannot see your hand, you cannot go anywhere. And the Quran says that for anyone to whom Allah give no light, means if you don't believe in revelation, that's the light, that's the guide. So without that, for them there's no light, right? And let's come to the revelation. So those who believe in the Creator and those who believe in the revelation is actually divine. It's divine guidance. It's light. But before we proceed and before I talk more about the believers and non-believers, let me explain one thing, right? So when we say believers and non-believers, let's not confuse things here. So the point is that it's not that every person who proclaims to be a believer would be a happy individual in his life, right? So there are 2 billion Muslims. It doesn't mean that all of them are perfectly happy. In fact, they are not. And the reason that they are not happy, or majority of them are not happy, is that they are not truly following the Quran, right? They are not truly following the guidance. So if you don't, the precondition for being a true believer is that you'll have to contemplate, you have to understand, and you have to practice, right? So without this, right, without contemplating the revelation, without understanding the revelation, and without practicing the revelation, what happens is that a believer is equal to a non-believer from the perspective of depression and anxiety and being lost, right? So from the perspective, at least from the perspective of those feelings, there's no difference between a believer and a non-believer. And a quick example of that is what happened recently in US. So there was an individual in Las Vegas, right? And he was more than 60 years old. He was a millionaire. He used to gamble millions of dollars, at least $1 million a night. And then he got depressed to the extent that for absolutely no reason at all, he opened fire on a festival, and he killed more than 50 people in that carnage, right? So that was mainly because of his mental state, because no one in his right mind would do that kind of a thing. So from the Muslim perspective, we would say that he was not following the Quran. So he was a non-believer, right? But then what happened was that last week there was another individual, this time in New York, right? And again, from the Muslim perspective, when he committed the carnage and he killed 8 to 9 people in his attack, what happened was that he also shouted Allahu Akbar. So he was actually a believer in the Quran, and from their perspective, he was a Muslim, he was a believer. But when it comes to the practice and contemplation and understanding of the revelation goes, he was equal to the non-believer. So there was absolutely no difference between the individual in New York and the individual in Las Vegas. Both of them killed innocent individuals for absolutely no reason at all, right? So we need to keep that in mind. And if you want true happiness and freedom from depression and anxiety and all those kinds of things, right, through revelation, then the precondition is that we need to contemplate, we need to understand, and we need to practice that. Otherwise, there's absolutely no difference between being a believer and a non-believer. So mere stating that I'm a believer and not following and practicing would lead you to exactly the same kind of extreme that a non-believer would go to, right? So let me take it to the next level now that you have understood this context. That the revelation is actually divine. It's divine guidance, right? It's light, and the Quran repeatedly called it light, and that light keeps them on a shortest and straightest path. So they go to the shortest and straight path, right? And then there are no doubts, no fears. There are no doubts, no fears, no ambiguity, and then that leads to contentment as well. For that, the verse in the Quran is Surah An-Naml, which is chapter An-Naml, in verse 79, which says that the path of revelation is the path of the manifest truth, right? So what happens actually in simple words is that if you believe in revelation, if you believe in the Creator, then these scientific discoveries actually strengthen your faith, right? Because that science becomes directly proportional to the strength of your belief, right? So it means that if the more you understand science and the more you discover new things through science, the more your belief is strengthened, because most of all those things are mentioned in the Quran since centuries ago, right? So the more, or in other words, that's inversely proportional to your doubts, right? So the more your scientific knowledge and scientific understanding increases, the less doubts you have. But there's a precondition, and the precondition is that you have to believe in the divine revelation. But if you don't believe in the divine revelation, then the more you understand science, the more you get confused. Then what happens is that in that case, science becomes directly proportional to your doubts, right? That's the total opposite. So science becomes directly proportional to your doubts, which means the more you discover, the more you get confused, right? Because you're not believing, you're using your own mind alone, right? And this is very important. But if you believe in the divine revelations, then you have all those signs mentioned in there, in the revelation. All the secrets of your existence have been revealed, right? And then the scientific knowledge increases your strength of iman and decreases your doubt, and then you have contentment of your heart. And when you have contentment, then what happens? You have
tranquility.
You have tranquility, and you have happiness, right? So you have lasting happiness. And that's the end of part 4, and then we'll discuss other parts tomorrow, inshallah.